Interesting. And this rumor relates to a man in the current world who even the most dangerous mercenaries and armed groups on the entire planet fear. Yes, as you heard, on the entire planet. From the beginning of the story, we can say that the person I'm talking about is not the type of person we should mess with, my friend. This character's name is Peter, and he is dangerous to the extent that I'm telling you about. But the surprising thing about this killer is that he is an elderly man in his 60s. For several years, Peter was known for his ability to kill anyone he targeted. However, his assistants finally managed to catch up with him, and it seems that things would have been better for him if he had died a long time ago. Unfortunately for him, at this moment, he is currently being hunted by thousands of dangerous bounty hunters. And that's not all. He has also lost all the assets or money he had accumulated over the years. The reality of the situation is that his pursuit has become a continuous threat to him in the organization he works for, even though he is essentially a legend among them, the most dangerous in the world of mercenaries. As you can see, the person standing with a ridiculous helmet on his head, standing above a sea of men he has killed, is Peter himself. He is the only one left, and he was recognizing the man standing in front of him as being the legendary Peter, even though Peter was wearing a silly helmet, as I told you. But in front of the person who is on the ground, it does not diminish his danger or make him any less terrifying. The man started to confess and shout that he couldn't believe or understand how Peter was still alive, even when he was being hunted and tracked by hundreds of thousands of killers. He began to feel confused that the killer, who is Peter, is still alive after all this, and how no one could track him down. Even if he is the legendary Peter, it remains completely illogical. So he began to say to him, "Peter, if you want to know the answer strongly," he began to walk toward him calmly, and then he said, "Even if thousands of you, or even hundreds of thousands of eyes are watching my every move, you guys will never be able to find me, because unfortunately, the Peter you are looking for is now." And Peter interrupted his words after that to keep us in suspense. The first thing the man on the ground saw was impossible for him to believe, because what he literally saw in front of his eyes was Peter. But he was not the same Peter he had seen before. In fact, it was Peter in a crazy way. Of course, you see me as crazy now because there's no difference. In the dialogue, we shift the scene back exactly 3 months, where we see Peter in his library, talking to someone and advising them to stop ignoring the calls and go to the hospital immediately. The person on the other end of the line is trying to make him understand that he will die in less than 3 months if he continues this way. Despite all this talk, there was no sign on Peter that his opinion would change, or that he would start going to the hospital, or even care that he was going to die. All we see is him collecting a mountain of pills that he refuses to take, which are the medications that the doctor or hospital prescribed for him. After that, he goes to organize the books in his shop. It's clear that he doesn't fear death, especially since the word itself is the name of his profession. Peter starts thinking to himself about the way he has lived the past 50 years of his life, which he considers a sacrifice for the organization. He doesn't regret anything in his life and begins to look at one of the books that teaches how to take a personal photo. He realizes that, in fact, he has never taken a picture of himself, which makes the old man look in the mirror while holding a pile of books, and notice how much he has aged. After a while, a student enters the shop looking to buy books, specifically searching for school books for middle or elementary school. As soon as Peter hears her voice, he quickly shifts from his boring and miserable mood to a more lively, friendly persona with his customers. He starts joking with her, and she smiles when she asks if he sells used school books. Peter tells her that the shop has all kinds of books from the 1960s up until 2020, including books from different countries. He asks her why she wants the books, and when the girl explains that she wants them for her younger brother, Peter assumes she is probably a student in a nearby high school and notices her name. When he sees the green mark on her, he deduces that she is older and not considered young, meaning she could be in high school. The girl is impressed by Peter's knowledge and starts asking him how he knows so much information. Peter calmly answers that he knows everything about everyone in the neighborhood. Of course, from your perspective, if you walked into a shop and asked the man how he knows all these things about you, and he told you he's watching the whole neighborhood and knows everything going on here, you'd know that this man is either in the FBI, in intelligence, or spying on you personally. The man is indeed suspicious, but the girl in this scene didn't show any reaction and understood him in a nice way. Suddenly, Peter pulled out a set of new school books, which shocked the girl. She explained to him that she only had 1,000 dirhams, which she considered a lot, and that she wouldn't be able to afford all these new books. Peter, the old man, smiled at her and told her that she could have all those books anyway, because he didn't need them. If you ask me why Peter's being so kind from the beginning, it's because, as I told you, Peter knows he has less than 3 months to live, so he wants to get rid of the books anyway. When the girl tried to refuse, the old man started tearing the plastic off the book or books so they wouldn't be considered new. The girl told him he didn't need to go through all that for her, but he assured her that she shouldn't worry about anything. Peter then told her that he could tell just by looking into her eyes that she truly loves her younger brother a lot. He began giving her advice that she should take care of her little brother and treat him well while she still has the chance, while she is still young, before it's too late, and she ends up regretting it. After Peter gives the girl advice, he goes back to sorting the books to give them to her in a nice way. The girl accidentally calls him uncle, and when she tries to correct herself and calls him sir, Peter laughs and says she can just call him sir from now on. Then she starts asking him if he has ever done something in his life that he regretted. Peter paused for a moment, thinking to himself, and calmly told her that people's regrets increase as they get older. Suddenly, our hero Peter began to recall the time he had to leave his daughter so she could survive, showing that his life is filled with risk from all directions.
While remembering that painful memory, he told the girl again that even though we all feel regret about the past, the reality is that you can't change anything that happened in the past. He then told her that it would be best for her to go home as soon as possible and take care of her little brother, instead of doing things she might regret later. At that moment, we see the girl in a shocking scene where she's about to stab Peter in the back, revealing that she was sent there to kill him. Peter told her she had to back off and promise not to kill her if she did as he said and listened to him. As soon as the girl heard this, she felt shocked and began to wonder how he knew the reason she came to him or even her plan. Peter revealed that he had memorized the faces of all the students in the high school she claimed to attend. At that moment, the girl realized that Peter had outsmarted her in the literal sense. He had overwhelmed her. If I were in her place, I would feel scared for my life because of that old man. Peter further emphasized her stupidity by pointing out that the knife she was carrying smelled of blood, which he had experienced for many years in his life. In other words, the knife she had was child's play to him. He also made fun of her attempt to mask the smell with cheap perfume, even though she could no longer sneak up on him. If you don't understand what I mean, he would smell the blood from among 1,000 perfumes. The girl repeated in her mind her earlier actions and her attack, because she had traveled a long distance to reach him. She took the knife and tried to stab him, but suddenly, and for no reason, she began to feel afraid of Peter's aura, and sensed that she might end up dead instead. In the end, the girl decided not to kill the old man, Peter. God bless you and your insane aura. Personally, I felt it too. Amid all this talk and everything that happened, Peter told her that she still had the option to take the books and leave, because he knew that what she had said about her younger brother was true, judging by the way she spoke. Peter also deduced that she belonged to the same organization he was part of, and the girl inadvertently revealed her cover when she used formal phrases, words that organizations use. As soon as the girl surrendered to reality, Peter began to say something very strange, that if the mission failed or if the person they sent failed, then the mission must intervene immediately. Peter then lunged at the girl with all his speed, but he was the one who would finish her before she could. After he grabbed her by the neck with all his strength, he began to push her, and at that moment, the girl didn't understand what he meant by his plan. However, she noticed 2 people literally descending from the ceiling and starting to shoot at them. In an attempt to defend her, Peter was hit by a bullet in his side. As soon as he moved away from the corner where they were shooting, he immediately pulled out his weapon to shoot at both of them. Unfortunately, he couldn't reach the other person on the opposite side of the girl who had already grabbed her. This put Peter in an unfortunate situation. The second person immediately attacked Peter and threw a powerful punch to his face. The person who punched Peter started mocking him, saying, "Is this really the legendary Peter?" "Oh man, you're just an old man," he added. "Look at you. You're the same age as these rude people." The second person, who had a strange octopus tattoo on his head, was named G. He was the main informant in the organization. He started talking about how Peter had the biggest reputation in their organization, and how he was the highest-ranking agent among them. However, all that had now turned to nothing, as he had become completely ill. As Peter lay on the ground, having been shot in the side, he felt that his life wouldn't last much longer. He began to ask them to get straight to the point and tell him why they wanted to kill him. The man with the 8 legs frankly replied that his boss didn't like Peter. Peter, shocked, didn't understand what he meant by "didn't like me." The man with the 8 legs clarified that there was actually a huge bounty on his head, amounting to $7.6 billion for just his head. That's why there were currently thousands of killers trying to win that amount the moment he left the organization. At that moment, Peter found it funny that the bounty on his head was the same amount of money currently in his bank account. The informant confirmed that it was indeed his money, and that's why they wanted to eliminate him and take his money. Since that money would go to the first person who could kill him, the man with the 8 legs, or the octopus head, wanted to be the one to take that money. With an evil look on his face, he ordered Peter to die by his hand. A powerful punch hit Peter's face again, and the second man continued to strike Peter all over his body. Due to the numerous punches, Peter was sent flying to the back of the room. Since he literally flew to the back and ended up in one of the rooms after receiving all those strong punches, the 2 men who were hitting him assumed that he had been kicked out of the place and was almost unconscious. The octopus man began to express his disappointment, feeling that the fight had ended too quickly. He ordered the other men who were following him to clean up the mess that had occurred. When he went to check on Peter, who was supposed to be unconscious, he found the old trickster surprising him with a flashbang grenade to blind him. Peter then escaped through the back door. After the octopus man realized that they had been deceived, he immediately ordered his men to chase Peter, who wouldn't be able to escape too far due to his severe injuries. The men went out into the rainy night to search for Peter, while the octopus man sat with the girl. At that moment, Peter was making his way to a playground and trying out one of the rides. He was lying in the rain, completely covered in blood after being beaten, and felt that this was probably the end for him. He began to think about how he didn't know how to fight at all. In that moment, he was shocked by the reality of his old age. He remembered how he never had a life of his own, and that he had lived every day and moment of his life since a young age for the organization, sacrificing his whole life for it. When he was welcomed into the organization, all the children in the 2nd grade were learning reading and writing, while he, on the other hand, was learning how to bleed every day to become a cold-blooded killer. Meanwhile, the other kids and young people were learning to use Facebook. While the others were going on romantic dates and trying to find their love, he had already become a Russian spy, suffering from frostbite all the time. If you ask me what frostbite means, it refers to the state of his limbs due to standing in the cold and snow for so long that they could become gangrenous and might even need to be amputated. Meanwhile, while ordinary people were starting families, he was busy fighting among a terrorist group just to survive, nothing more. This shows that Peter had given his entire life to the organization and that he could have died countless times, more than one could count. Despite all this, things started to change when the new president took over. The new president felt that Peter was too old and believed he could no longer conduct business and expressed a desire to get rid of him. During that time, Peter was feeling all the pain while lying face down on the playground. Peter felt betrayed by the organization because they treated him this way, after he had literally sacrificed his entire life for them. Even though he never desired wealth or honor, they still wanted to eliminate him, as if he were worthless to them. He began to believe that he had lived a pitiable life and that he could not die such a miserable death. Peter tried to struggle to get up one more time, insisting that he wouldn't allow them to take his money. As he remembered his daughter, whom he had left behind many years ago, tears filled his eyes again. Finally, Peter the legendary was lying on the ground, rain pouring down on him one last time. At that moment, we can say that Peter's life was almost over. Returning to the octopus man, we see his followers sitting together discussing how they were very close to claiming the bounty on Peter's head if he hadn't escaped from them. One man wondered why such a huge bounty was placed on the old man's head. The other explained that it might be the organization's way of showing him respect. However, the first man said that all he cared about was the money, and didn't care at all whether the man was a legend or just a nobody, emphasizing that all he wanted was money, to the extent that he had abandoned the title of kickboxing champion, boxing so that he could become a prize fighter for killing the old man himself and claim the money. He began carrying a picture of Peter that they had taken while they were on the rooftop. He promised his friend that next time, they would surely succeed in killing Peter. However, at that moment, both of them heard someone saying, "Do you know this is my first picture where I look like this?" The two men were surprised by the stranger and how he got in at that moment. The stranger continued his speech. "Or should I say, this is the first picture ever taken of me." The second man thought that it might be Peter, because it was the same clothes in the photo, but he told the first man that it couldn't possibly be him. The unknown person said, "I don't know either. When I woke up, I was like this." Then, the person who had hit Peter earlier came closer to him, the one who had delivered a powerful blow to his face, completely destroying his body with all the punches. He said, "I'm sorry, but you came to the wrong place, kid. This isn't a suitable place for a student like you." This indicated that the person in front of them was wearing the same clothes as Peter, but at a very young age, which made it seem like he was someone older, at least in high school. Then, the unknown person wearing the same clothes as Peter said, "I came here because I know everything, so stop wasting my time and take me to the man with 8 legs." Both men were confused and shocked by what the kid was saying. They were trying to remain calm because they didn't understand what was happening. They concluded that the person in front of them was from their field, meaning he was a professional killer. So, without much thought, they decided to attack him immediately because he had to die for sure, as he was certainly aware of things about the organization that he shouldn't know. But at that moment, they were literally shocked to see that Peter, or the person wearing Peter's clothes, was able to easily block the punch. The second man was stunned by the terrifying strength that could easily deflect the blow. If you were to ask me why he was so shocked in such a strange way, it's because the person in front of him, who had blocked that powerful punch, was supposed to be a kid in his eyes, or at least a high school student. Due to the shock of both men seeing Peter standing in front of them, this time they felt something entirely different about him. For some strange reason, Peter had now become a young man, making it hard for them to believe he was the same person. Thus, they began to argue among themselves that he must be someone else. But he was wearing the same outfit, yet Peter assured him that he was indeed Peter, and that he didn't need to doubt it any further. With all his insane strength, he clenched his fist, breaking every part of his fingers. At that moment, the second person also tried to stab Peter from behind. But what happened was completely unexpected. Peter delivered more than 5 punches to different areas in the blink of an eye. When the person who had hit Peter before began to ask him who he was, and who had sent him here, which organization he was working with, Peter responded with something unrelated. He said that people who know how to handle kitchen utensils are from the 3rd class, while those who renew the use of all weapons are from the 2nd class. As for the 1st class, they are the ones who can use anything and everything as a weapon. The second man didn't even understand what the kid was saying, especially since at that moment, Peter was holding the legs of an octopus and decided to attack him with the sharp knife immediately because he saw him as foolish. With one movement, Peter threw the knife at one of the octopus's legs, and with another move, he strangled the second man using the octopus itself. He held him up with a very powerful grip in the air, bringing him down hard, essentially crushing his head. Thus, we can easily say that Peter eliminated the followers of the man with 8 legs. The bounty on Peter's head, which was 8 billion, along with thousands of pursuers seeking him, and that menacing man and the only photo they had of him for tracking him, have now disappeared because the old Peter is indeed dead, and a new Peter has been born. At that moment, the man with 8 legs was shocked, as it's a long name. We can say that they had indeed lost track of Peter, and that he would soon be announced as officially and internationally wanted among all organizations and gangs, with a bounty on his head, as I told you at the beginning. Therefore, he wanted to capture him first before anyone else could reach him. After all, a man like him at his age is suffering from cancer, so his life is practically over. It would be nice if he showed a little kindness to the younger ones and died in peace. At this time, in one of the places specifically, in one of the bathrooms, people were astonished by the sight of the person in front of them. He had taken off his clothes and was staring at his body in strange ways and movements, and that person was actually Peter, who didn't understand what was happening. How did it happen that the bullet wound he received in his side had completely disappeared, and even the cancer was gone from his body? He realized that he was not hallucinating, but had completely transformed into his younger self, and his mind was unable to explain this at all. The only thing he was sure of, at least for the moment, was that all the organizations and gangs wouldn't be able to recognize his current appearance. No matter how much they searched, they would find traces of Peter, but the old Peter they were looking for wouldn't be present anywhere in reality. At that moment, Peter decided that the first thing he would do was change his clothes. Completely disheveled at that moment, he heard some people talking loudly, discussing how they were going to get rid of someone's father because he couldn't pay back the debt he owed them. These people were essentially creditors and also smokers in a public place where smoking was prohibited. Peter approached them and said, "Hello, guys," as if he were older than them, you know? He asked them to smoke outside since this area was a no-smoking zone. They responded, "Who are you talking to, huh?" Peter realized they seemed like they needed a lesson on how to talk to someone older than them. Indeed, one of them moved to slap Peter in the face, wanting him to move away from in front of him right now. He was the type who dealt with people like that, and the best solution for him was to walk away and leave it be. But before he could walk away, they started insulting him again. That's why Peter changed his plan. It had actually been his plan from the start, not to waste time. He quickly closed the bathroom door on them because they were about to dance around while Peter returned to them calmly. The group was still sitting there, insulting and mocking him, prompting Peter to say that they were about to find out what happens when you don't show respect to the elders in the eastern country they were in. Before the first one could slap Peter again, Peter had already delivered incredibly fast moves to sensitive areas, enough to knock him out immediately. The second person pulled out a sharp weapon and threatened Peter, saying he would regret it if he knew who he was dealing with. Peter replied that he didn't actually know him, but the pocket knife he was holding was being gripped incorrectly, and if he kept holding it that way, he would eventually cut off one of his own fingers. The idiot started asking how that was possible and how he could cut his own finger with his own stupidity. Peter began to teach him, with a terrifying look, that a person stabbing with a knife shouldn't put his arm out like that. The second person decided to attack Peter and stop all this nonsense. But on the other hand, Peter, with one swift move, managed to dodge the attack, disarming him of the sharp knife. He then grabbed the knife and quickly struck at his neck. All of this happening in the blink of an eye from the perspective of the idiots. The shock was clearly evident on his face, and he started screaming because of the stab wound Peter had inflicted on him. Peter replied, "You fool, if I had really stabbed you, you would be dead by now." The idiot then began to ask him about his true identity, wanting to know who he really was. Peter responded that he didn't know what illegal things he was currently involved in. But if he ended up knowing his true identity, it would be Peter's duty to kill him on the spot. Once the big guy heard Peter's terrifying words, he embarrassed himself and thought, "Oh God, what have I done?" At that moment, Peter repeated to himself that he would live his life this time by doing things legally. After Peter left, he checked his bank account and noticed that the 7 billion he had had disappeared completely. However, he had already decided from the start not to touch that money, and there was definitely one person in his mind who was responsible for all this. The orphanage where Peter grew up, called Al-Mad, which was run on a small scale by a religious teaching organization. Man realized he needed to catch him as quickly as possible. He ordered the girl with him to inform him as soon as she knew Peter's location. The girl, however, had mixed feelings because Peter had essentially saved her life. When the tattooed man entered the restaurant, he was surprised because it wasn't a working day for him. Yet he saw a young man sitting in front of him. When he asked if he had a reservation, Peter replied that, in fact, there was no reservation. It was just a personal grudge, nothing more. The tattooed man asked, "Do you mean that I pressured you to pay for the restaurant or the food or anything like that?" Peter said, "You could say that, my friend, but my bill was a bit larger, about 7,000,000,006." The moment the tattooed man heard this, he immediately signaled to close the doors of the place, stating that it seemed like Peter knew who he was. Regardless of whether he knew him or not, he would not leave the place alive today. He wondered who this guy was and how he knew all this information about Peter. He was sure he wasn't from their organization. Could this be Peter's secret child? Or one of his students? But he remembered that Peter always worked alone and never needed anyone's help. The tattooed man decided to give him one chance to live, presenting him with two options. The first was to reveal Peter's current location and return home alive. The second was to resist and die from a bullet to his head. Peter then told him that he actually didn't like either of those choices, and that, in any case, he hadn't seen anyone alive after hearing those words. Then Peter said to him in a crazy tone, "What about the third option? What if I told you that I am Peter?" After the tattooed man asked Peter who he was and gave him the choice between two options, either to reveal Peter's current location or take a bullet to his head, Peter replied that he actually didn't like either of those choices and that he had a much better answer. The answer was that he himself was Peter, the one who had killed all of his men. This made the tattooed man furious at Peter's words. He started saying, "What are you talking about right now?" Peter responded, "Aren't you listening to anything, my friend? I'm telling you, I'm the one who killed all your men."